Imagine a man who could create energy from the sun, long before the world believed it was possible. He designed powerful ways to control electricity and helped shape early ideas of television. But none of his inventions were recorded in his name. In 1935, on a quiet road in Lebanon, his body was found inside a crash car. No witnesses, no clear answers. He was only 36 years old. Some say it was an accident. Others believe he was silenced. Who was Hassan Kamel Al-Sabbah? What did he really invent? And why does the world seem to forget him? Maybe the truth was too dangerous to know. The year was 1894. The world was changing. In Europe, machines and factories were growing fast. But in Nabatea, a quiet town in southern Lebanon, time moved slowly, like an old prayer. Lebanon was still under the rule of the Ottoman Empire. Modern schools were rare. Science books were hard to find, and only a few people had the chance to study new ideas from the outside world. Most families lived by tradition, faith, and survival. And yet, from this quiet corner of the empire, a very unusual boy was born. His name was Hassan Kamel Al-Sabbah. Even as a child, Hassan was different. He didn't enjoy playing war games with the other boys. He preferred to sit quietly, listen to the wind, and watch the world around him. But most of all, he loved looking at the sky. At night, while his family slept, Hassan would climb up to the roof and sit under the stars. He didn't just look, he studied. The moon, the stars, the shadows between them. One night, he saw a lunar eclipse for the first time. The bright moon slowly disappeared behind the Earth's shadow. People in his town came outside, surprised or even scared. But Hassan just stared. He wasn't afraid. He was amazed. How can light vanish and then return? He wondered. That night, a new thought entered his heart. A question. And from that question, a dream was born. At home, Hassan lived between faith and knowledge. His father, Sheikh Abdullah Al-Sabbah, was a respected religious teacher. But more than that, he was a man of wisdom. He believed that religion and science could live together. Their small home was filled with books, not only holy texts, but also old manuscripts of science, math, and philosophy. Hassan loved reading about great Muslim scientists from the past. Al-Jazari, who designed water machines and clocks. Ibn al-Haytham, the father of optics, who explained how the eye sees light. Al-Kindi, a philosopher who wrote about numbers, colors, and sound. To Hassan, these men were not just names from history. They were like friends, guides, heroes. He copied their drawings, rewrote their ideas, and tried to build their inventions with his own hands. One day, after studying Al-Jazari's water wheels, Hassan built a small one from bamboo, wood, and scrap metal near a stream behind his house. It didn't work at first. He failed 3 times. But then, it spun. Slowly, quietly, water moved, and energy was born. That moment changed him. Not just because the wheel turned, but because it proved something. Even without a lab or tools, I can build something real. I can create. But the world outside his home didn't understand him. At school, Hassan was seen as strange. He asked too many questions. He brought wires and drawings to class. Some teachers thought he was being disrespectful. Other students laughed at him. What do you think you are, an engineer? In Nabatea? Dream on. Still, Hassan stayed quiet. But deep inside, he often felt alone. Is it wrong to love light? He asked himself. Is it wrong to want to know how the world works? When those thoughts became too heavy, he went back to the roof. Not to find answers, but to breathe, to think, to be free. And often, his father followed him there. They sat together in silence under the stars. One night, after Hassan came home upset from school, his father placed a hand on his shoulder and said softly, "If people are afraid of the light, my son, your job is not to run away from it. Your job is to understand it. And one day, share it with them." Those words stayed with him forever. They became his compass, his comfort, and his purpose. A few years later, Hassan made a choice. A big one. He decided to leave Nabatea. He wanted to study real science. in real classrooms, with real teachers. He wanted to go to Syrian Protestant College in Beirut, a modern university with laboratories, books, and ideas from around the world. The day he left, he hugged his father tightly, and in a quiet voice, he whispered, "I will come back, but not just as a boy who watches the stars. I'll return with a light of my own, with only a small bag, a deep dream, and the sky in his heart." Hassan stepped onto the train, leaving behind his town, but carrying the future inside him. But Beirut was not like Nabatee. The sky was brighter, but the world was colder. Nobody knew his name, and science, he would learn, was not always pure. It came with power, politics, and pressure. Still, this was the place where his journey would truly begin. The boy who loved the stars was about to enter a world that would change him forever. The sky in Beirut felt different. Not as quiet as Nabatee. The stars were dimmer, the streets louder. But for Hassan, each step into this new city felt louder than the traffic itself. He stood in front of the gates of Syrian Protestant College, holding an old suitcase and a dream heavier than anything he carried. They said this was where knowledge lived. They said this was where the future could be built. But when Hassan entered his first classroom, he quickly realized this was not home. Words on the blackboard were unfamiliar. The professor spoke fast. The thick science books, all in English, felt like walls between him and the knowledge he wanted so badly. Hassan, raised in classical Arabic, sat at the back, head down, writing quickly, but only catching fragments. Equations flew by like birds. Terms vanished before he could understand. But Hassan had never been shaped by comfort. He was built by hunger for truth. At night, when others were sleeping, Hassan turned on a small lamp and reopened his books. He copied them page by page, translating word by word. His hand hurt. His eyes burned. But something kept him going. A fire inside. A whisper in his chest. "I must understand. I have no other choice." Time passed. Slowly, those strange formulas became familiar. Electricity stopped being just theory. It became beauty. Hassan fell in love with it, not just as power, but as the language of the universe. Electricity flowed silently, gave life, brought light, like a quiet prayer. He learned about alternating current, electricity that changes direction many times a second. He learned about power conversion, how energy moves from one form to another, like water turning into electricity. And it all felt like magic that he could explain. In his small notebook, Hassan started to sketch circuits, machines, voltage regulators. He wrote down questions no one had asked him in class. Can sunlight become electricity directly? Can images be sent through waves without wires? These questions sparked in his mind like tiny bolts of lightning. He didn't know when they would become something bigger, but he could feel it coming. Though he didn't speak much, his professors began to notice. He didn't raise his hand in class, but his grades were always near the top. He didn't join long debates, but in the lab, he understood more than most. Soon, he was invited to become a lab assistant. No ceremony, no praise, but quietly, Hassan became a part of something larger, supporting science from the shadows. And through it all, one truth remained. He had not reached the end. The answers he needed were still far away. Then came a chance. MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, a place sacred to scientists, the heart of modern engineering. Some warned him, Boston is cold. America is far. But Hassan believed the truth always lives far from home. He left with the same suitcase, the same dream, but a heart that was now braver. But in Boston, things were not as beautiful as in his dreams. The campus was grand but cold. The students were brilliant but distant. Once, while walking the hallway in his simple coat, someone mistook him for a janitor. Not because of how he spoke, but because of how he looked, his skin, his accent. He didn't argue. He didn't get angry. He had already learned. This world is not always fair to people like him. But Hassan's silence was not weakness. It was fuel. At MIT, Hassan began to create. He built a high-efficiency generator, a machine that produced more power with less waste. He designed an automatic power controller, a system that adjusted electricity flow based on a machine's need. He even started working on an image transmitter, an early version of what would later become television. These ideas were new. Some were revolutionary. General Electric noticed. They offered him a place in their research division. And finally, in a real lab with real tools, Hassan started writing the future with his own hands. But behind every invention came a bitter truth. His name was not listed on the patents. His ideas were filed under the company's name. In official documents, he was called only a technical contributor. For the first time since falling in love with light, Hassan felt something dark, that the world of science didn't always shine. Sometimes it swallowed names and buried the ones who made the light. Still, Hassan didn't stop. He began copying all of his notes into private journals. He rewrote his inventions by hand, quietly, carefully, not for the company, for history. If the world won't remember me, he thought, then I will leave something it cannot ignore. But as his inventions grew, so did their power. They were not only efficient, they were advanced, too free, and, for some, too dangerous. Hassan didn't know it yet, but the more light he created, the longer the shadows behind him became. General Electric. For most people, it's just a company. But for Hassan Kamel Al-Sabbah, it was the doorway to a world he had only dreamed of. A world where ideas could live, where dreams of clean energy and open knowledge could shine like electricity. He stood among giant metal machines, cold testing rooms, and the hum of turbines beating like the heart of the modern age. There was no dust from Nabati here, no call to prayer in the evening sky. But Hassan carried all of it in his mind, as a reminder of why he had to keep dreaming. A laboratory is not a place for speeches. But for Hassan, every wire and circuit was a kind of prayer, not to earn fame, but to give something useful to others. He developed an experimental solar cell, technology to capture sunlight and turn it into electricity, not to power factories, but to light up the dark villages of his homeland. To Hassan, the future was not about cheap power, but equal access to energy. Then he designed a high-efficiency power converter, a device that could send electricity with minimal loss. Revolutionary. Simple. Too useful to ignore, but maybe too ahead of its time. He also worked on a long-distance image transmission system, one of the early steps toward what we now call television. But instead of applause, there was only silence. His early days were full of energy and hope. He arrived earlier than anyone, left later than most. But slowly, he began to feel something that no instrument could measure, a distance growing around him. Some colleagues respected him, but many stayed quiet. Some of his notes were left unpublished. Some were taken by other teams. And in official patents, his name was often listed only as a co-inventor, even when the ideas came from him. He never complained, but deep inside he began to understand. You can create light and still live in the shadows. He was not punished, but he was not celebrated either. No one stopped him from speaking, but no one asked him to. And slowly, something began to change inside him. Not his passion, but his belief that this system was fair, that great inventions would always be recognized. The truth he saw was different. For Hassan, science was not about profit. It was about hope. And hope is not always the first thing people look for. His nights grew longer. Between his experiments and blueprints, he began to write, not technical reports, but personal reflections, about how the Arab world could rise through knowledge, about how energy could bring freedom, not just power, about how education could grow without control from others. He wanted to go home, not because he had failed, but because he realized something deeper. Knowledge does not always grow in the most advanced place. It grows where people need it most. In 1935, Hassan made a quiet but powerful decision. He returned to Lebanon. He left behind comfort, equipment, and recognition, and brought back unfinished plans, and a dream still waiting to be built. He wanted to start a technical school, to teach, to guide, to build a generation of Arab scientists. He dreamed of a world where his people didn't just import technology, but created it. He didn't come back as a hero. He came back as a teacher, a son of the land, returning with light. And even though not all of his inventions were recognized, even though many of his ideas stayed locked in drawers, his mark was never truly lost. He had lit a fire, in circuits, in solar cells, in imagination, but most of all, in the belief that knowledge has no passport. In 1935, Hassan returned to Lebanon, but not because he gave up, and not because America rejected him. He came back because he believed something deeply. The future of the Arab world must come from within, not from foreign powers. In his bag, he carried designs for the future, simple solar panels for villages, efficient energy converters, wireless transmission systems. And in his heart, he carried a message: science should be free. Free from politics, free from control, free to help anyone who needs it. In Beirut, Hassan began teaching at the American University of Beirut. But to his students, he was more than a teacher. He was a dreamer, a guide. He made them believe that the Arabic language could also speak the language of science. He planned to build the first energy research center in the Middle East, a place where young people could build their own future, powered by the sun. But deep down, he also knew big ideas often come with big risks. He saw it at General Electric. He knew how inventors could lose credit, how silence could become a way to erase someone. Then, that night came. March 31st, 1935. Hassan got into his car, alone. No letters, no goodbye, and the night gave no answers. The next morning, his car was found crushed on a quiet road. Inside, Hassan was gone. He was only 36 years old. News spread quickly. Students at AUB cried. And in his hometown of Nabatee, the call to prayer echoed longer than usual, like it carried grief too heavy to say with words. But behind the sadness came a storm of questions. The professor never drove fast, one student said. His brakes were just replaced, said a mechanic. Why was the case closed so quickly? Soon, rumors began. Some local media called the crash unusual. There were no public witnesses, no full investigation, and no official autopsy. Years later, in Lebanese newspapers in New York and in Arabic political writings, names began to appear. General Electric. Did the company fear Hassan's inventions would spread in the Arab world? French colonial intelligence. They still had power in Lebanon. Did they see him as a threat? Zionist conspiracies, mentioned in political papers from the 1950s, claimed global forces wanted to stop Islamic countries from developing key technology. Even the CIA was mentioned in some Lebanese American circles, though no proof was ever found. These theories appeared in writings and discussions after Hassan's death. There is no legal evidence that proves these groups were involved. But the rumors grew, not because of what was said, but because of what was left unsaid. The Lebanese government made only one short statement. Hassan Kamel Al-Sabbah died in a car accident. No signs of foul play were found. But to many people, that short statement only made things feel more strange. Still, more than who may have caused it, the painful truth was this. How could a genius like him disappear so easily? With no investigation, no warning, no justice? Was the world really that quick to forget a man who tried to light it? But history is not always written in official books. Sometimes it survives in memories, in empty classrooms, in old notebooks, in small solar panels lighting up small villages he once dreamed of helping. And in every unanswered question, his name still lives. Hassan may be gone, but his mission is not, because true knowledge does not die with the inventor. It keeps moving, to new minds, to new dreams, to new times, and maybe among circuits and sunlight, his ideas are still waiting to be found again. The sky over Beirut was quiet that afternoon, not because there was no sound, but because the man who once dreamed in waves and energy was now gone. There were no sirens, no big ceremony, just a short newspaper article in 1935. Hassan Kamel Al-Sabbah died in a car accident. He was only 36. Most people didn't know who he was. Even fewer cared. and the world kept moving like he never existed. But real history is not always written in bold letters. Years passed. Far from Lebanon, solar panels powered satellites. TV became a part of daily life. Energy converters became standard in modern electricity. And behind it all, there were early designs. There were hand-drawn sketches. There was a man whose name was forgotten, but whose dreams came first. Hassan didn't live long enough to see his ideas change the world. But that doesn't mean he failed. Some people leave behind wealth. Others leave behind a name. But Hassan, he left behind direction. In the Middle East, as renewable energy started to grow, people quietly began to mention his name again. In small classrooms in Beirut, in science discussions in Cairo, in student seminars in Amman. He was remembered as a pioneer without a spotlight, a dreamer who never became famous, but also could not be ignored. And from his absence, something powerful began to grow. Not statues, but a spirit of independence. That the Arab world could build its own technology. That science could rise from Nabatea, not just from Harvard or Paris. That greatness doesn't need permission. Hassan never married. He had no children, no one to carry his name. But today, thousands of young people install solar panels, study electricity, build new machines. And without knowing it, they are carrying the dream of a man who once felt alone. Because maybe the best legacy is not the one we leave behind on paper, but the one that keeps inspiring others, even when our name is forgotten. If this story made you see the world a little differently, please like, share, and subscribe, so stories like this can reach more people. You can also request a new topic or inventor in the comments below. And if you have thoughts or questions, let's talk in the comment section. See you in the next video. And remember, some lights don't shine the brightest, but they're just bright enough to guide the next generation.